Hello and welcome to Model Kit Stuff, and in today's first impressions video we're looking at this Revell's Supermarine Stranraer, only it's not really Revell's. Revell released this in 2012, but it wasn't a new tool because it was originally released back in 1978 by Matchbox. And I think the only real difference, other than you're only going to have one colour of plastic in here, is that Revell did change the decals. So it's not identical to what you would have got when you bought the Matchbox version. Now, Matchbox originally brought it out in 78, and they reboxed it in 79 and again in 83. And I've got to be honest, I don't know much about this aircraft whatsoever, so I did a little Google. So it appears that the design originates in the early 30s. And Supermarine were looking at possibly a commercial use for this. Certainly around that time there was a lot of thought that flying boats were going to be the norm. Indeed, Germany built a great big lake in the middle of Berlin so that they could have flying boats come in and out. So flying boats were seen as possibly the way to go forward for commercial airlines in the future. Around about that time, so it's understandable they were doing what they were doing, but I think 1933 a prototype was built. 1934 it entered service with the RAF, and in the early war years, just the first two or three, 39 through to 41, it was used primarily for convoy and U-boat patrolling, really. I know that 40 of them were built in Canada for coastal defence and patrolling type roles. But for me, it's something a little bit different to all the Walrus and Catalina flying boats out there. She has a little bit of an unusual shape in the sides, as we'll see as we look at the parts. Otherwise, she's fairly standard looking flying boat, really. And a good number of these actually saw use after the war in a civilian role. So you could easily buy this kit and paint it up as you like and turn it into some form of civilian operation. Certainly you'd find them in operation in places like British Columbia and places like that. Without more of ado, let's have a look at what we get. So, as always, we'll start with the box. It's typical for that time period, Revell's blue stripy box. The artwork, I think, is exactly the same as it was for Matchbox back in the day. I don't think they've changed it at all. We can see there's a little German arrow in the background there. The side information is pretty much the same as the front. It does tell us, however, that it's a skill level 5. The box number is 04277, the kit number I should say, and the scale is 172. The other side is the same, and then on this end we get some pictures of the completed model done in a museum style. As always with Revell, it's an annoying, totally impractical end opening box. And inside we have familiar Revell instructions and a bag full of bits. Let's have a look at the instructions first. So our instructions are fairly typical of Revell. Their older style of instructions. So we've got an A4 black and white sheet that's not stapled, so it'll all fall apart on you and you'll lose your place. There's a picture of the model on the front, which is quite nice to see, although it's in black and white. And then we've got a little bit of history in German and in English. And it tells us there's a copyright of 2012 there. So, yeah, the last time that this was released as a kit. Then we have our key. Again, quite familiar for Revell. Some of these icons are particular to them. Then we have paint colours, which will be Revell colours, which means no doubt we'll have to mix paints, which we do in 3-4 places. So yeah, just the Revell paints called out, so you'll have to do your own conversion of those if you don't want to use Revell paints. And personally, I don't. There's nothing wrong with them, actually. They're quite good paints, but it's just not a system I buy into particularly. Then we have a little Sprue map, which does actually have the numbers on, so that's useful. So we can see we've got 4 large Sprue, and then I'm going to guess that's a clear one. And before we've got to the end of the page, we're also at step 1. So we're starting with the pilot by the looks of it. So we've got a pilot. He's going into what looks like a fairly basic seat in a fairly basic cockpit. And then that's being left as a sub-assembly. And we're building up these little, well, that's a door with a very thick glass window by the looks of it going in there. And then we've got a bulkhead there, which has got some form of controls in and a decal to go on. So then we've got the pilot going in. I know it looks like he's not at the front, but that's because there's a gunner's position there. We've got more of those chunky windows going in. They might not be as chunky as they look in the drawing, to be honest. Fuselage halves go together. Then we're building all 4 of the wings. There's a little peg symbol there, so it's telling you you're going to have to clamp them. Then we've got the tailplane, which is quite a clever way of doing that, I think. It's got twin tails, hasn't it? So that will go on, twin tails will sit in, that's all in one piece, so that should all be good. Then we've got the canopy going on. Looks like we've got options. It doesn't really tell you what the options are unless it's open and closed, but we'll have a look when we get to it. I imagine the sides slide back or something like on a walrus. Then the tail support struts, tails going in. Propeller looks like it's one piece, and again, options appear to be paint and what colour the spinner is and whether you've got yellow tips or not. And then we're mounting it into the engine disc. Step 19, it says 19A. So that's building the engine up into the cowling, engine nacelle, mounting the engine. Then it says 22B, and it's giving you different parts. So you must have different options of cowling or something. That's not very clear. It might become more clear as we go through it. Both engines get mounted onto this centerpiece of wing, goes on the struts, so that's quite cleverly done. And then individual struts lining up with the wing, that will be horrendous, because it always is. Then we are building up. Oh, okay, that's interesting. We've got a little truck. I imagine that's for the tail. Then we're building up the wheels for the truck. Then we're building the floats up. I'm not quite sure what that is. It looks like some form of fuel pump or something. Sure it can't be, but that's what it looks like. Then we're building up the wheels. Looks like they're in 2 halves. Oh, okay. It's the wheel axle. So it's the frame that the wheel mounts on. It does look like a fuel pump though, doesn't it? So that goes into the wing and side. Then we've got a support brace, and then we've got separate wheel hubs. Matchbox were really ahead of their time in 1972, weren't they? What, 78 was it? 78 when this came out. So yeah, the cage, if you're having it landed, then you've got this little trolley that you put underneath. I guess you could modify it, but it doesn't look like there's an option for a stand. Then we've got the exhausts going on, some of the antennas and bits and pieces going on the top, the delicate bits. That's going in behind the gunner's position, so I guess that whole thing slides forward to close it. Gunner's ring going in for the gun. And then we've got a pilot with his legs cut off, poor soul, and his gun. And then we've got another gunning position there in the middle of the aircraft, is that? Which has a little glass screen, I think, and another gunning ring. Pilot going in, this time he's got his legs. I should say gunner, not pilot. And then we've got a tail gunner as well, and another guy without legs. So is that 4 figures we've got in this? Wow, Matchbox were really pushing the boat out. But then they always did give a fair number of figures with their kits. Some of their armour kits had a number of figures. Then we've got a ladder. So again, typical Matchbox, thinking outside the box and, diorama potential. So we've got a little ladder there. Then we've got rigging plan. Isn't that lovely? And then we've got our paint scheme and decals. So camouflage, we've got the walking areas marked out. We've got little decals there from the propeller. That's really nice. No roundels on the wings though, that's interesting. And then we have another paint scheme here. Right, so there are 2 paint schemes. That wasn't clear to me. So probably the 2 paint schemes relate to the 2 different options. Different paint options we saw with the propellers are related to which paint scheme you're doing, but that wasn't really clear. I'm just having a look. Both of them appear to have all the gunning positions on, so there's no physical difference, it's just paint. Right, decals next. And we have, these are standard to all. So all these feet are on long strips of decal film. So you might want to cut them out and place them individually. We'll have to see. The decals are printed by Revell, and they feel a little bit thick, but not like Tamiya thick, but there shouldn't be a problem. And generally don't have problem with Revell decals so much. And we've got the anti-slip areas as well. Then we've got the roundels and the markings for each different version. So that says 240 Squadron and that says 228 Squadron. So probably a little bit of research is needed. Interestingly, the centre dots are separate, with the exception of those ones. So not quite sure what's going on there, but yeah, you've got no stencils, you've just got basic markings. Right then, let's have a look at these 1978 Matchbox parts. So obviously originally this would have been different coloured, probably 2 or 3 different colours. So if we put that to one side, and we'll start with this top sprue. So we've got on here the wing tops, and we've got detail that's scribed in, so that's nice, all recessed panel lines. We've got some texture, although it's a little bit harsh, but it's definitely there. That's good. The propeller is nice and crisp, and actually quite thin. Look how flexible that is. So that's quite nice. Some quite nicely moulded pipework. You could change that out if you wanted, but that looks quite good. That's our steering column, so that's a bit chunky. You won't be able to get any photo etch for this. You might be able to get some decals. We've got some very featureless bulkheads there. The only detail on them is ejector pin marks, actually, but they'll do the job, I suppose. You can always weather them, but how visible they're going to be, I don't know. And then we've got all these wing struts. They're very nice. Other than a bit of seam on them, there's no flash. All of the sprue gates are on the connection points, so a little bit of clean-up needed on those, but that's better than having to clean up front surfaces and stuff, so that's not so bad. This will be our cockpit floor pan, which again, totally featureless. And then we've got the other tail half there. You can see where they've removed the word England from made in, and we have the old Matchbox kit number here, which is PK601D. So yeah, parts are nice, detail is somewhat lacking. So our next sprue, we've got wing sections on here. Again, some texturing, a little bit of a moulding imperfection there, nothing major. We've got the tail part there. Big hatches. When they do detail, Matchbox do detail really big, thick hatch on that. Yeah. Then we've got, those are the gun mounts. We've got this massive armchair for the pilot. The little, I'm not quite sure what that is. Then we've got the engine discs. They're not too bad. You put a wash on those, they'll stand out quite nicely in the background there. Some details for the top of the wings. The guns, the handles are filled in, so you might want to just sand them out, get them into a U shape, and then put a little bit of thin plastic rod in to put a handle back in. Otherwise, they're quite crisp. They're not bad. Not bad. And those will be our gun rings, which again, the parts are thick enough that you should be able to clean them up okay. Then we've got 3 of the figures. 2 of probably all 3 of the gunners, I'd imagine, and they've all got the same pose. And doing that thing that figures in aircraft always appear to do, which is to have one hand like that and one hand like that on the knee. Very strange pose, but yeah, that's the pose they always seem to have. And then we've got this rather chunky, ugly ladder. So the texturing is okay, although it looks a bit uniform, doesn't it? And probably a bit stark. I'm guessing it wasn't quite as recessed as that, but again, that is typical of Matchbox. Yeah. Right, next sprue, more wing sections. This time, there's quite a bit of flash on these parts and on the sprue generally. So that's unusual for old Matchbox kits, even for late pressings, but the figure's a bit flashy. This guy will be the pilot on his own here, I guess. Then we've got wheels, wheel halves, and then those will be the hubs, I would think. Yeah, so that's quite nice. We've got the tail trailer thing here, the little wheels for it, the again, very heavily moulded, really thick that, and the support struts for the wheels. Thing is, the parts are so sturdily designed, as in they've got the basic shape, they're a little bit chunky. It was easy for youngsters to just nip them off and build this, but if you're looking for detail, you ain't gonna find it in here. It's very basic. Very basic. Okay, this is the last of the grey plastic sprues. Interestingly, the part number on here is PK61-A. I wonder if the A and the D we saw earlier relate to the sprue frame number. Could be. Let's just have a look. Yeah, that one says C. So right, okay. I get that now. So we've got the completely featureless floats. There's no detail on those. We've got the engine nacelles, which have got a little bit of recessed detail on, but really nothing. The tail has some texture, like the wings. It's a little bit heavy. Then we've got the engine nacelles, which are quite crisp actually. I'm guessing there was Matchbox Leslie products or something in the tail, which has been removed. And we've got some parts of the upper section of the fuselage there, so that will go in there to form your gunner's ring. A little bit of detail on there, not much. Some more of the aerials and fittings, and there is our little door, which will go in here. And then of course we have our two fuselage halves, and this is what I was saying about the shape. If I put that on profile, got this lovely sweep down here, so you can see it's got the usual step that you see on flying boats, and that's to reduce the drag as it gets up to speed. There's a little bit of sink in there. That's the first sink we've seen though. I say that and then I found another bit, but in terms of the actual buildability of this, it will go together really well. Matchbox kits always fit together really well, so we won't have a problem there. There's our little sliding door for that top hatch. A little bit of flash to clean up, but nothing major. Yeah, okay. Now, when it comes to detail, you have to really look, and then you might find a tiny little bit of it, but there ain't much. Finally, we have our clear parts, and as I look at the canopy, I'm surprised at how nicely moulded that is, because it's always quite heavily done when it's Matchbox, which makes it easy to hand paint in actual fact. You've got really sunken glazed parts to this, and really big, thick, heavy frames, which are not realistic, but it makes it easy to paint. I do believe they design these things with kids in mind, but there's virtually no distortion through those or through the front one, so that's good. It's just a shame that there's nothing inside for it to not distort. There's a bit of distortion on that one, however, that's curved, but not so bad. And then, to be honest, all of these windows here, which don't look great because they've all got sink in them, all of those windows, the rectangular ones, could be replaced with some glue and glaze or similar. Yeah, so you're only really going to use those two parts, and I'm fairly sure in the instructions it said options, but you've only got one, so no idea what that was about. And then we've got two little lenses there, which I'm guessing must be wing lights or something. So there you have it, Revell's release of Matchbox's 1978 tool Supermarine Stranraer. What are my first impressions? I really love Matchbox kits, and I think it's really important that I say that before I say anything else. I think that Revell were pushing their luck to release this in 2012 because by modern standards of what a modeler would be expecting from a kit, this falls fairly short in terms of what you get inside the kit. I don't see why Revell couldn't have done something to bump up the cockpit. They even could have reworked the tooling to add a little bit more surface detail, rivets on the floats, for example. I have no doubt, however, that it will build up really easily, and probably for someone fairly new to the hobby, or a youngster, if you're just looking for something to build for a bit of fun and you're not too bothered about how accurate it is, and how much detail there is in it, and it's just a process of I want to build something and I want to put some paint on it, and I want to do it in a weekend, this is probably going to fit the bill. I think the subject matter is really interesting. I like the fact that we've got a flying boat that's a little bit different to the usual 2 or 3 different types that you see. Personally, I quite like flying boats. I have a bit of a thing for them, so I like the fact that I've got this. This was given to me as a gift, actually, and I will build it at some point, but it's probably going to be one of those just for fun type builds. I'm not probably going to go to all the bother of rigging it and that sort of stuff, but I'm sure there's a fairly fun weekend to be had putting this together. So at some point we will put this in the build pipeline and get round to it. It's not really a classic Matchbox kit in my mind. There is definitely better Matchbox kits out there. So even for Matchbox, not their finest hour, but Revell were really chancing their arm in 2012 to release this, and probably suspect it won't get released again. So have a look around. You probably find the Revell version is cheaper to pick up than the Matchbox one, just because Matchbox more collectible, and Revell will have chucked a lot of these into the market, so you'll probably be able to pick them up fairly quickly. Okay, there you have it. I hope that was interesting, insightful. If you were possibly thinking about getting one of these, you now know what's in the box and what to expect. I have just quickly checked on ScaleMates, and there are 1 or 2 decal options out there, aftermarket decal options, if you can find them. But I imagine they'll be going out of print as the model is out of production. Okay, take care everyone, enjoy your modelling, and I will see you very soon.